Hey gang. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about the database model. Now, when you think of a database, you have to ask yourselves a couple of questions. What is a database? Okay, and a database is going to just be something where it houses all the people that you know. And then there's a big difference between a database and what a data bank is because there's a lot of information that you have to have on there. Obviously, you're going to want your contacts' full name, their first name, their last name. You want to get their phone number. You want to get their email address. And those are the four basic things that you should have. Of course, it helps if you go even further, making sure that you're having their home address on there so you can send mailers, or maybe their anniversary from when they bought their home, or maybe it's their birthday. There's a lot of different information for what you can keep on there. And then the question is what do you use for your database? And there's so many different options for what you could do. Back in the past, they just literally had, it was like a small, notebook that people were just writing all their stuff down. Your phone can be a database. There can also be spreadsheets that you use. And then a lot of times our agents are using CRMs for their particular database as well. Then the question comes in how often do you communicate it with it? And this is going to be different, varying for depending on who you talk to. The real question though is how often should you communicate with it? The other question is what's your return on investment with those communications for what you do? And then what should it be for how often that you're communicating that? And the thing is all of this is actually specified in the MREA and the lead gen model. It's on pages 133 to 152. And Gary Keller goes through and he talks everything about the MREA and everything about lead gen on here. And what it does is it breaks it down into a model for us. And that is kind of our database model through here. And basically your database is your lead capture. And then you break everything down, and he says into have mets and haven't mets, right? Or you can also just do it into your leads and into your contacts. And then it goes and it breaks down. So if you have somebody that's going into your leads, then you should put them on a 19 to connect plan. If you have somebody that's in your contacts and you've done business with them, then they go on a 36 to convert plan. And I know a lot of that is, well, what does that mean? Well, he actually goes through and he even tells us about that and breaks it down. And then it just goes into a 19 to connect is 4 touches with a quarterly phone call, maybe 12 touches of an email, 2 touches from like a promotional direct mail, in an annual event. And then it even breaks down for the 36 time. And the whole thing about this is just really kind of mind share. When people are thinking about real estate, you want them to think about you. And how do you do that? Well, it's not talking with them once a year. It's by making sure that you're staying in communication with them every single time, at minimum 36 times a year, so that when they think of real estate, when they think of anything else, that's when they're thinking of you. And today I want to talk about the 4 touches, the telephone calls. Because a lot of times people will set up and they say, oh, well, yeah, I do kind of a newsletter or I send this out. And, when I've talked with agents, everybody says, well, yeah, you should communicate with them. And then I ask them, well, how often do you do? And everybody knows that, hey, at least 4 times a year, at least once a quarter, you should go and communicate with them. But my real question for you is how often is it being done? And when it's not being done, how much is it costing you when you don't call? That's the big question through here. So let's go through and kind of find that out. So things you're going to need to know first is how many people do you have in your database? We're not talking leads, we're just talking about the contacts that you have in here. So for this example, we're going to use 500 people. You need to know your average sales price. And then for this example, I like to use actual numbers, but then I like to go a little bit lower just to kind of give you guys an idea. And let's just say we took the average sales price of $300,000. Depending on where you're at, it could be higher or lower than that. And then you need to know your average commission. And I just took $9,000 for the average commission based off of that sales price through here. So then you go through and you talk about, okay, what's your database worth? You're going to take your number of METs and you're going to times that by 5%. And that's your database return on investment. Gary goes and he talks about if you're actually communicating with your people and you're actually doing that in the systematic way of at least 36 times a year, then you should be able to get at least 5% of a return on investment. So if you had 500 people in your database, you should get 25 pieces of business, assuming that you're communicating with them on that 36 touch. So then you take your 25 times your average commission of $9,000, and you get $225,000. So every year, the 500 people in your database is worth approximately $225,000. Wow. First off, can we just think about that? I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? All you have to do is just put 500 people in your database and communicate with them, and that should automatically equal out to 225,000 GCI for you. But let's go a little bit even further into that. How many calls a day does that mean we have to do? Well, we know that there's 3 months in a quarter, right? We know that there's 4 weeks in a month, and let's say that you're working full time, an average of 5 days a week. So you're still taking 2 days off. And if you did that math and you took the 500 people and you're dividing it by 3 because we wanted to call them once a quarter, all you have to do is call 167 people a month. You take that, you divide it by the 4 weeks, now you're only calling 42 people a week. And then if you divide that by 5, that's 9 contacts per day. Okay? So now, in order to do $225,000, all I need to do is just put 500 people in my database and talk to 9 people a day. That seems pretty simple. But that still doesn't tell us, well, how much does it cost us if we don't actually do the calls? So let's go through that. If you took that $225,000 and you divided it by the total people in your database, then each contact in there is worth $450. Then you divide that by 4. So that means each time that you make that call, and that's because you're calling them 4 times a year, once a quarter, that's $112 for every call that you make. Then all you have to do is just times that by the amount of calls that you were supposed to do per day, and that equals an astounding $1,008. So that means every day that you don't talk to those 9 people, it's costing you $1,000. My mind is blown by this. If you have 1,000 people in your database, then that's $2,000. Just think about that. For every 250 people you have, it could be costing you $500 or more. Remember, we kept these numbers just on the lower side of things. And that's something to think about. And I don't know about you, but now knowing that, my goodness, missing 9 calls a day is costing me $1,000, you can even go and figure out how much that is per call. But I'm going to call my 9 people. In fact, I might even bump it up to 10 or 11 or 12 people, because that's the kind of money that we're leaving on the table when we're not calling our people. And we've all had it happen before. How many times have you not stayed in touch with people? And then all of a sudden you called them, maybe it's just to check in, maybe it's calling them for a particular reason, and then you find out that they've already sold a home and they sold it with somebody else. And that's happened because you didn't stay in touch with them, because they weren't a part of a systematic communicative plan, and that's costing you even more than that too. So now the question just goes into, well, what do you do when you call them? What do you say? And the weakest thing you could possibly say is, I just called to check in. I just called to see how you're doing. Said differently, you know what that means? It means I have no value to add. How many times people are calling you? Does your doctor call you just to say, hey, I'm just calling to check in, just calling to see how things are going? No. And so it's really just about, what are you doing to come from value when you're making these particular calls? And there's 2 ways to increase the quality of your touches. You can increase the quality or the frequency by which we make them. And I think increasing the quality is probably one of the bigger things what we can do. I think it's also the thing that makes us so afraid to maybe go and make the phone calls in the first place. Because when we think about, well, why aren't we doing our 9 calls a day? Maybe stuff happens. There's fires that always has to get put out. But maybe it's just also we're afraid of making the calls. Maybe it's just because we don't believe. We feel like we're actually bugging our people. And if we feel like we're bugging them, it's probably because you're not coming from value with them. So what are some different ways that you can go and you can come from value when you're making your calls? Now, there's all sorts of different things. So you've got stuff like, when it's springtime, hey, it's springtime, you got your spring cleaning type stuff. You can call and just, ask them how that's going. Do they need anybody? The snow is melted. Now you've got leaves on the ground. You need somebody to come help pick that up. Maybe trees need trimmed. Maybe gutters need cleaned out. Those are all the different things that you can call just to have conversations and then come from a value because you've got all of your vendor contacts that you'll be able to provide for them. You can even take it a step further. So one agent actually went through, and a lot of agents will go and they'll send postcards that say messages like it's time to do your spring cleanup and give you like 5 ways to get ready for spring. And this agent actually went through and made even more of a difference because the leaf bags, you have to go buy these paper bags that you can put your leaves in and put them on the side of the road for the garbage man to come pick up. Well, they went and they bought 1,000 bags and they actually put their name and their information on it, and then they went and delivered it to their people and their contacts. Imagine that type of touch. That's both needed and useful, and I guarantee you they're going to constantly be thinking of you from that. And we have a whole entire database model that goes through and talks about some of the different unique touches from what you can do. There's things like spring home pictures. There's golf tournaments you can do. Maybe it's a shredding party. Maybe it's having Easter bunny pictures or family photos or back to school photos. Or maybe it's photos with Santa. Maybe it's doing some wine tours or a Zoom event or a charity drive. Could be doing a swag giveaway, a parents' night out. There's a lot of different things from what you can do that will create some unique touches that you can go through and start making those phone calls for. Imagine how much easier is it to say, like, hey, did you know we're giving a pie giveaway around the holidays? It's a perfect time for you to maybe touch base with them. And maybe you're doing it for everybody in your database. Maybe you're doing it for a select few. Maybe you're putting them into a raffle. Either which way, it's a touch that you get to go and to make from. And then that's not only just one, you can make that call from before, and then you can even make a call afterwards. How did it go? Maybe sharing some of the different things with them. All of this is different stuff on what you need to do in order to make sure you're doing your calls. But it also just goes back into 9 calls can equal $1,000 a day. So start thinking about that and start thinking about what unique touches that you want to have and where are you going to come from value when you're going and you're making your calls. And if you need more, we have an entire database assessment playbook that goes through everything and that gives you 4.5 pages worth of stuff and actually walks you through for your contacts and helps you to understand your return on investment for what that is. Because maybe it's not 5% and maybe we can work on and we can build that. But really, you got to start somewhere. And let's start with making those calls.